In the world of Naruto, one of the most heartbreaking moments in the series is when Obito sees Kakashi kill Rin, which leads to Obito going onto a rampage where he kills all the Miss Anbu before a heartbreaking Obito cradles Rin's body, swearing to create a world where she lives again. As we all know, Obito in the aftermath of Rin's death during Naruto chapter 606, it was revealed that Obito spared Kakashi's life because he didn't care about Kakashi anymore, which in turn left Kakashi alive. However, what if this never happened? How would the Naruto story change? Would things end up for better or would things end up for worse? In today's edition of Naruto What If, we're going to look at just that scenario. Like always, in order for this scenario to occur, we got to establish a trigger point, and the only trigger point here is for Obito to kill Kakashi in the aftermath after he killed the Miss Anbu. In the moments after he held Rin, instead of Obito looking back to glare at Kakashi like he did in the manga, Obito would set Rin down in a pool of blood, and then he would proceed to break Kakashi's neck. He'd then rip out the Sharingan eye that was in Kakashi's eye socket and place it into his own eye. This would change everything. Obito had already been told by Madara that when two Sharingan are working together, the true power of the Sharingan can be unleashed, and during the war, we saw Kakashi and Obito's Sharingan work together and they're able to speed up the Kamui jutsu, which means this Obito now is going to be a lot more broken, because when Madara is training him, Obito is going to have both mangekyou Sharingan, which means this Obito is going to be a lot stronger. This will bring us to our first major change in the timeline, where Obito has both of his Sharingan. The night of the Kyuubi attack, i.e. Naruto's birthday, i.e. the anniversary of Rin Nohara's death. I believe Obito still is going to learn about Kushina's pregnancy, given that he came to Konoha on that day to kill Minato on the anniversary of Rin's death, and under no circumstances does Minato beat Obito with both mangekyou Sharingan, where he can use Kamui to stay intangible for 5 minutes, he can use a Susanoo, and he can use Kamui projectile weapons. And because of the modifications that Madara did to Obito's body, Obito doesn't have as big of an issue to worry about with his eyes going blind. After all, we saw him spam Kamui throughout the entire Naruto manga, and you also have to remember that Obito didn't show any signs of going blind until after you got both eyes and you got into the issue with the Kaguya stuff. In this timeline, Minato would be killed in battle, and it would not be a contest, which means that the third Hokage would never be saved by Minato, because originally Minato teleported Gamabunta on top of the Kyuubi before it could shoot a Biju Dama at the third Hokage. This means in one night, Konoha would lose both the third and the fourth Hokage. The Kyuubi would continue going on its rampage in the process. At some point, Kushina Uzumaki would have left her deathbed where she'd been previously holding baby Naruto, and she would have gone out to try and stop Kurama by holding him down with her chakra chains, but eventually she would have ended up dying in the process, especially if Kurama is being controlled by Obito in this scenario. This now means that both of Naruto's parents are dead. However, more changes would occur if we consider the extended canon of the series via the Itachi Book of Daylight novel. So in that novel, when the Kyuubi was going on its rampage, Fugaku had prepared to go out towards the battlefield with the intention of helping the Hokage fight off against the Nine-Tails, and he planned to do so with his Sharingan, which we now know was a mangekyou Sharingan because of the anime. However, Danzo and the elders forbade Fugaku from going onto the battlefield and instead had him oversee the evacuation of the citizens because they feared that an Uchiha was behind the Kyuubi attack and did not allow him near the battlefield. Given how drastic of a change these circumstances are in this version of the timeline, upon seeing the Nine-Tails destroying whole sections of the village, Fugaku would basically throw his middle finger up to the elders and go towards the battlefield, where one of two things will occur. So number one, he tries to undo Obito's genjutsu with the Nine-Tails and is promptly killed by Obito in the process, or upon Obito destroying chunks of the village and taking Minato's life, Obito decides to just leave the village, and if this happens, then you have the possibility that Obito just destroys the Hokage monument at the sight of Minato's face, because that's like pissing on the grave of somebody you dislike. And there's a strong possibility that Fugaku makes eye contact with Obito, which means that Fugaku now knows an Uchiha was behind the attack on the village. I don't think it's too crazy to assume that Obito with this genjutsu would have been skilled enough to keep Kurama locked away in genjutsu for years on end, given he was able to control a perfect Jinchuriki for several years in the form of the 4th Mizukage. While the temptation to seal Kurama into the Gidomazu would be there, I do think that Obito training under Madara and Zetsu would have knowledge to not have Kurama's chakra sealed into the Gidomazu statue first, though it is worth noting that the Akatsuki did almost break the Gidomazu, but I do believe that Obito would be smart enough to realize that as they began to start sealing Kurama into the Gidomazu statue, the statue was in the process of shattering and he would have stopped the sealing process, which, as a reminder, you don't need all the Akatsuki members to seal the Biju inside the Gidomazu. It just speeds up the process. Now, while Konoha is rebuilding from what's left of the rubble, I believe that Obito would still order Nagato to create the Akatsuki. If we assume that Obito's keeping the QB under a Genjutsu, this means that we won't see Obito using Kamui to go into each village to snatch up the Jinchuriki and bring them to the Gidomazu and rip out their Biju. While it is possible Obito takes the time to find someone to seal the Nine Tails into their body, it's worth noting not every person is compatible with the Tail Beast. For this video, we're going to assume that he doesn't go looking around the world for a new QB Jinchuriki. It's also worth noting that just being an Uzumaki is not enough to make you a Nine Tails Jinchuriki. It was specifically stated that Kushina had rare chakra even amongst the Uzumaki clan, which is why she was chosen to be Kurama's Jinchuriki. Sure, Obito could go back to Konoha to find baby Naruto, but the issue with that is that the Nine Tails still at play, especially if he cannot keep the Nine Tails in his QB dimension. I don't think Obito's going to pull right back up to Konoha to destroy the village just to try and get Naruto, especially since he has to try and contain the Nine Tails. He has no reason to want destruction for the village, and just sneaking into the village to grab Naruto. Again, you have the issue of the Nine Tails. Nagato, even if you use a Chibaku Tensei, Nagato's not strong enough to contain the entire Nine Tails. He struggled just to handle one half of it during the pain arc. Assuming that in this timeline, Fugaku was not killed by Obito and Shisui and Itachi was still around, then the Uchiha would have a major problems on their hands. Their village was mostly destroyed. The Hokage monument was destroyed. The 3rd and 4th Hokages, along with their wives, are dead, and if Fugaku shares what he saw, that an Uchiha was controlling the QB, this leads to Konoha having even more suspicion on the Uchiha clan than ever before. Even worse, with Hiruzen and Minato gone, there's a strong chance that Danzo or Orochimaru could ascend to the position of Hokage, which, in my opinion, I think that you're likely going to see Danzo made into Hokage. This would mean that the Uchiha wouldn't just be placed at the edge of the village like they were previously, but instead the Uchiha will be under a complete martial law style lockdown, which means that an already pissed off Uchiha clan will be even madder than they were in the original timeline, which means that the coup d'etat could be sped up. Instead of it taking 8 years, it could take, say, 6 or 7 years. Now, another major change is that, unlike the original timeline where Hiruzen found a baby Naruto, Danzo will be the one that found a baby Naruto in the aftermath of the Nine Tails attack. He snatched up baby Naruto long before Jiraiya even got word of Minato's death, and due to Naruto being both an Uzumaki and the son of the 4th Hokage, Danzo would see a lot of potential in the young Naruto, and he would have him placed in the route to begin training. Naruto's childhood wouldn't be that of a troublemaking brat that we saw in the original timeline. His childhood would be spent molding him into a heartless killing machine, being forced to kill his friends like Sai was when he underwent that same training. Naruto in this timeline, while he wouldn't be a Jinchuriki, he'd never know the taste of Ichiraku ramen. Danzo as Hokage would likely want to show a sign of force to hold off any villages from seizing the opportunity to attack Konoha while they were in a weakened state from the attack. One of his first orders as Hokage would be to call back Jiraiya and Tsunade, since the power of the collective legendary Sannin would be too great to overlook in terms of village security. If we go by the information that was in either Naruto Databook 2 or in Naruto Fanbook number 1, the collective power of the legendary Sannin was stated to be enough to rival the collective 5 Kage, which would be more than enough to make any other village think twice about attacking Konoha. However, it's worth noting that in this point in the timeline, the Leaf and the Cloud Village were still at war with one another, even though the Third Great Ninja War was considered to be over. It's important to remember the treaty between the Cloud Village and the Leaf Village didn't happen until Minato was 3 years old. It's very possible that the Cloud Village uses this as an opportunity to try and attack Konoha. However, I do believe that once the Raikage hears that Tsunade and Jiraiya have returned to Konoha, making the legendary Sannin whole again inside of Konoha, any attempt to invade Konoha will be put on pause. Assuming the Raikage doesn't try to invade Konoha, more issues would arise for Danzo as the 5th Hokage. First, Tsunade might be a brilliant medical mind and a strong fighter. She still has a fear of blood. It's possible Danzo goes to extreme lengths to try and brainwash her fear of blood away, but given how traumatic it is, I don't think he'd be successful. However, the true problem lies with the Uchiha clan. Eventually, young Uchiha prodigies like Shisui and Itachi would gain Danzo's attention, especially when we consider the fact that before the Kyuubi attack, Konoha was already low on manpower, which is why children were allowed to fight in the Third Great Ninja War. But given half the village would have been destroyed by the Nine Tails, anyone with a speck of talent like Itachi would be handed a kunai and a headband a lot sooner than they were originally. Also, given the treatment of the Uchiha clan, it's likely Shisui would be a lot more loyal to the clan than the village, and the same with the young Itachi, who still would have had the wisdom of a Kage at the age of 6, and he would have seen the flaws of Danzo as Hokage. In this timeline, both of these young Uchiha would likely be going along with the Uchiha clan's plans to overthrow Konoha and make Fugaku the next Hokage. While I've done a video explaining in detail Fugaku's brilliant plan to overthrow Konoha, I'll take a couple of key points from that video because it's relevant to this what if. Fugaku's plan relied on the following two key details. Shisui was supposed to use his body flicker to enter into the Hokage office and take the Hokage hostage, while Fugaku led a small team into the Hokage tower to kill whoever resisted and order the Hokage to publicly appoint him as Hokage. The plan sought the least amount of bloodshed, but if the other clans would have tried to fight back, then bloodshed would just be bloodshed. Assuming that Fugaku still takes 8 years to formulate his plan, then Itachi would be 13 and Shisui would be 15 going on 16. Fugaku having both Itachi and Shisui on his side for the coup d'etat changes everything for Danzo as Hokage. Fugaku and Shisui both have a mangekyou Sharingan, and while Itachi wouldn't have it in this timeline, even after Shisui used his body flicker to bum rush Danzo as Hokage, Orochimaru will be a non-issue and killed off. Fugaku's mangekyou Sharingan genjutsu will be enough to handle Orochimaru, and even Itachi with a base Sharingan was able to one-shot Orochimaru in the Naruto manga when Itachi was a member of the Akatsuki, which, for reference, Itachi, when that happened, wasn't much older than he'd be in this scenario. Unlike the original timeline where Danzo had Shisui poisoned before he got his eye snatched, which we learned in the Itachi Book of Midnight novel, Danzo would have a fresh Shisui on guard, fully prepared to fight, and by the time that Fugaku made his way there, the duo of Shisui and Fugaku would be enough to subdue Danzo. At that point, Fugaku would order Shisui to use Kotomatsukami to order Danzo on top of the Hokage rooftop and have Fugaku named the next Hokage once the villagers are assembled. While internal issues arise inside of Konoha, a version of the Akatsuki somewhat different from the one we know in the original timeline would be formed. Depending on if you believe Obito would have kept both the Nine Tails and the 4th Mizukage under Genjutsu at the same time, Kisame would still join the Akatsuki, but in my opinion, though Obito does have 2 mangekyou, I don't think he can control the Nine Tails under a constant Genjutsu as well as the 4th Mizukage, which means in this timeline, Itachi and Kisame would never join the Akatsuki. Orochimaru being dead also means that Suigetsu would grow up as a member of the Hidden Mist Village, likely becoming one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, and all the sound ninja would never be experimented on. The Akatsuki will begin hunting down the Biju, and in this timeline, things would be a lot easier due to the villages not being in communication with one another. Gar will be plucked out the Sand Village, likely with Deidara killing Gar's whole family, including his father, especially as Sasori has to step in. One by one, the Jinchuriki will be taken from the village and sealed away, and eventually the Nine Tails will be sealed into the Girumazu. At that point, Obito and Zetsu will betray Nagato like they originally planned, forcing him to use Rinne Rebirth to revive Madara in exchange for Nagato's life. At that point, Obito and Madara will go on to destroy the entire Akatsuki, and once the moment had presented itself, Zetsu will end up betraying Madara, reviving Kaguya, and as a result, it comes down to, do you believe that Obito can use Kamui to escape the infinite Tsukiyomi? Even if he does, Kaguya is still gonna kill him because this Obito does not have Sage of 6 Paths chakra, which means even with all his Kamui hacks, Kaguya still is gonna shove a bone ash jutsu right up Obito's ass. However, that's gonna be it for this newest installment of Naruto What If. In this timeline, it looks like things took a turn for the worse. However, leave your suggestion for the next Naruto What If, and if I like it enough, I'll turn it into a video, and who knows, depending on the suggestion, this one might actually end up having a better ending.